I'm coming. Sorry. So tonight we'll do our night, cover a recap of what we've seen prior, and then we'll get into the benefits and the instructional projects. So here's a recap of the departments we've heard from to date, as well as the considerations that the projects are presented to the board so far. These four here, as well as these four. Later on in the presentation, we will see a list of the considerations, the parts of the ones that we have tonight, and open it up to the board for discussion. So where we left it last week was just a little under $6 million for the budget gap. Again, no use of the 5 tools that we typically talk about at this point. There is an update this week to the tax cap calculation. Nothing on this piece, so again, the tax-based growth factor is 1.0288 and our CPI inflation factor is 2%. The piece that did change is the capital exclusion piece. I had mentioned before there were some adjustments for building aid. So there's an adjustment of around $71,000 for additional building aid calculated into this figure. And then in discussions with our construction manager and our fiscal advisors coming ahead for next year and what the capital construction is going to happen in the 1920 school year, we did have to make adjustments to our upcoming borrowing for our cash flow for the 1920 year. And because of that, we had to borrow more. We're condensing the schedule, doing more work in 1920 than initially planned. We had to increase our interest payment by $325,000. So with those two adjustments to the capital exclusion, which is again any of our capital expenses offset by transportation aid and building aid for the capital expenses, our new maximum allowable levy is $40,602,000, which is an 8.6% increase, or $3.2 million. But the budget considerations will circle back to the tax cap later and open it up to the board for discussion. So I'm going to do a brief overview of our benefits budget. Here's an overview of all items related to our benefits. I'll get into details on some of these items more, but we have our employee retirement, ERS, TRS, payroll expenses like Social Security, our admin fees and health claims, our contributions, dental claims, workers' comp. So at this point, we're showing an increase of 1.5%. You'll notice that the health claims are still flat at $15 million. As you'll see, they are trending up. We are still trying to come up with what the best approach is to handle these increased claims and what we want to budget for and how to handle that going forward. So flat for now, but still in the works to figure out how we want to plan that in the future. So here is a historical overview of the TRS rates. They are estimating for the decrease for 1920. These rates are tied to the market, so any dip in the market or weak market performance, these rates will go back up. So while it's looking good for 1920, we want to be mindful of what it could mean in the out years, making this decrease. ERS is staying pretty flat, 14.9 this year, 14.6 estimated for 1920. So this is an overview of what we pay for our stop-loss insurance and our administrative fees for our self-insured plan. The first column is a representation of our stop-loss costs. The middle column is our admin fee, and the dark blue column is the total of the two. So we've had an increase over the years. In those figures, we talked quite a bit about the stop-loss insurance during last year's budget presentation. With some expecting high claims to some of our claimants, and our rate was adjusted accordingly because of that. On the flip side, this is what we get as a benefit for paying debt insurance. So that has been going up over the years as we have no pay payments on our books. Once they reach that threshold, we get that money back through the stop-loss insurance. And this is an overview of our claims history. This is just claims, not offset by any stop-loss or anything like that. Just claims experience. So 17-18, we were over our $15 million budget, and here is our trend to date. So as of February this year, we're a little over 11 million with a comparison of where we were end of February in the years prior. So trending higher, we're aware of it, we're monitoring it, and using this information to plan for 1920. Any questions on anything benefits related before we jump to instructional?
If you could go back one slide to that slide where you were actually, I'm sorry, go forward. The difference in this slide is that the previous years had stop loss applied or not?
No, this is just claims.
Okay.
Yeah, just claims, just claims.
So is it your expectation that you mentioned how the 15 million was flat in the budget at this point, but obviously we're exceeding that.
Yeah.
Are you saying that may be left flat, but there'd be other ways of closing that gap, or you're expecting to come back and recommend raising it?
We're going to recommend an increase of sorts. We're just not sure what that looks like yet.
Okay.
There are other opportunities to adjust for our claims. Talking to our auditor for a while tonight about where we stand and the challenges of the self-insured plan, and we do receive those stop-loss insurance payments that get recorded as a revenue. That's one of those self-insurance claims are one of those expenses that the state calls a ordinary contingent expenditure. So it's part of our ordinary course of business. If our claims do exceed our budget, we do have the opportunity to amend our budget based on the stop-loss payments received as an insurance revenue received. We can't rely on that if the company needs to keep the budget in pace in some capacity with our claims, but we do have that insurance as an opportunity to amend also. So using those two pieces and planning how we want to use them is what we're trying to work out.
So at some point in the budget process, we can expect you'll come back with some more detailed recommendation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Benefits questions? Then I'll turn it over to Tony.
Good evening. So I have here the overview of the instructional budget and items for consideration. I'd like to start off with just a general slide, just a quick overview. That first line item, of course, is going to be detailed in the next two slides after this, so we're going to move past the salaries and setting items momentarily. The next pieces, the contractual, the conferences, the supplies, and the equipment, is a combination of district-wide programming as well as individual buildings and their requests and needs, all put into a single figure. You'll see the difference really happening with the supplies. If we shuffle around the money to meet the needs of the year, you're going to see a decrease in those supplies and an increase in equipment is the largest thing to note there. As you see, we have some additional equipment needs coming in the next fiscal year. Our BOCES line has a slight increase. We're still fine-tuning that budget. You'll recall last year we talked about some BOSS science kits that were being renewed with the new science curriculum. It takes a 3-year cycle. Last year we saw our heaviest increase in those kits that are used in our K levels. This following year we do have another chunk of money that needs to be put towards those kits. We are looking for other ways to do our science program as we work through curriculum work in the future. However, as right now, we still are part of that service, and there's additional costs that came with that. We'll see one more year of a slight increase in those BOSS kits on our BOCES budget, but that's a small amount. And you'll see the increase here representing $150,000 $3,000 increase or thereabouts. We're fine tuning that though. That posted budget is still in progress. And tuition typically represents those attend the Fin Academy, our obligations there. And the textbooks is a state per pupil allocation that's given to us. That was a lot really quick. Is there any clarity or questions that need on any of those items? This next slide is just going to break down part of the salary information. Again, we'll get to that first item in the next slide, the pre-K instructional support. This slide will detail, however, all others, including those in the central office and the clerical, principals, the guidance department, and their clerical. The instructional CTE is, what's out there, this is not referring to those teachers in our high school that do CTE-related courses, business, technology, and our family consumer science. So those are the representative teachers there, as well as our library staffing and the aides that are associated with our library. So the additions or the changes we see there are contractual based. And then we have our instructional stipends. These are our extracurricular stipends, the clubs, intramurals, etc., that are paid out per contract. In-service is referring to our mentoring committee, our in-service committee, but also this is where you recall sometime 2 years ago now, we added a 0.4 curriculum coach that is on this line. So just a slight increase in that. And then our home instruction is tuition costs tutoring costs. Paying people to go to home for medical needs usually is usually it's 2 people at a time for those situations when there's a homebound instruction that's required due to medical need. Any questions on those items? So we'll detail that first one in the next slide. Yeah.
Is there an increase in FTE on that first line, or is it just basically the same staff?
The pre-K-12 instructional support?
Yeah.
I'm going to show that in the next slide. And there was a slight increase in the growth from the previous year. Besides that first line, any other questions? All right, so let's look at that first line. I'm broken out by our grades. Every year we have to talk about why I have to say 0.27 and 0.73. It's just the way that we have our traveling teachers denoted. We're going between buildings and how they go and they service different buildings. Music teachers get some points amongst many some other services. That's what that 0.27 and 0.73, that all comes out in a full FTE in this case. The addition Doug, is on the teaching assistants and teaching aides and monitors. We had 2 additional, one at Ridge Road and one at the high school that were added that weren't budgeted for last year. And that's why we see an increase in that line significantly more than the other line. So 2 teachers is allocated just by our need and our projection of our current. And our extra help is obviously those outside of teaching. Substitutes are TAs and teacher aides. Miscellaneous is just that, catch-all. That includes the curriculum work pay that we do with our staff, healthcare buyouts, workshops, educational credit for TAs. So the additional fee, if I recall, was just going to be in that TA assistants, teacher aides, and monitors. That was 2 in the previous year. Current projections hold us maintaining the current need in our staffing in those grades. But that too, we continue to get updates from our registrar to determine what is the number of sections required. We do have contractual limitations there to say how many staff are needed, depending on our students in the building. It's a big help to go to the home boundary schools, so we know have definite numbers of kids that will be in specific buildings moving forward. Our pre-K registration is wrapping up. We'll have some good kindergarten numbers as well. So that is, we try to get the most up-to-date numbers for those, determine the sections in that TE. Right now we're projecting that will be all required as far as our section numbers, current staff. Any questions on those salaries? Okay. Last but not least, our considerations. Yes, it's typical. I don't do the longest list of any department for servicing our students, for assisting our staff and doing the work that we do, great work we do with our kids. You'll see that this is in no particular order. We have our high school and middle school calculators. Our Algebra 1 and Geometry Algebra 2 calculators are outdated. They're starting to age out. We're going to have to consider a replacement cycle to ensure that students taking the exam have access, or those that need it during class time have access to this technology is required by the course. You can speak to that and you understand that, but maybe you've used some of these antiquated, older TI 91s. What are we at now?
I don't know, but some of the old ones are even used in like the science rooms.
Yeah.
So that's even more.
There are still probably very similar ones I would have used. There are pixelated screens that still you can see the pixels on the curve. We are due to update these. We have to consider two things. Do we consider this a textbook purchase where you just buy them out once, which was what was done? We have so many aging at the same time. Or do we consider it like a technology purchase where you age them in over a couple years? Always being aware that what if the technology changes and making sure that we're staying on top of that and we're in the right calculators now, that those same calculators can be ordered next year and the following year and they don't go obsolete in those 2 years, right? So we also have conversations with the math chair and the high school administration about what exact calculators are needed for what exact courses. Are there an opportunity to diversify? Would an Algebra 2 calculator have to have more functionality, touchscreen, colored to see the overlapping axes and parabolas? Down to does the Algebra 1 calculator be very basic? It's just learning slope, and so maybe occasional parabola. So these are the conversations we're having. That number represents the whole shebang, replacing all the old ones we currently have and stuff. That could be part of that. We can go with half, less, whatever. Something we're going to have to address sooner or later. It's just how. So we will continue to have that conversation to figure out what the best approach is. But like I said, that number represents replacing everything. Next one is the Intermediate School Student Council Stipend. We just think this is just an amazing opportunity to increase our student leadership in younger grades, to have them more involved and to showcase what they do in leadership areas and to have someone oversee that student government. That stipend is very, you see the mark out there for approximation. It would be a contractual negotiation that would have to occur. It does not currently show in a contract. So a stipend committee, a contract, some conversation with the unit to determine what exactly that end game is. That number represents somewhere about where we might pay. The middle school has the same stipend, the high school has a similar stipend for student government. This is just an approximation to give a placeholder in there for the sake of it. So that number can go up or down, but not significantly at all. It's just a good bang for the buck as far as student engagement. We had a great opportunity to have some special education slots added through our BOCES campus. We're currently 8%, if I recall, we said 8 students up there. I think it's correct. We would like to add 2 to that number for 10 total. Again, this just provides alternative pathway to graduation for our most at-risk students. We are having success there. We'd like to continue to see that program. Given the size of the school we have and the students that probably benefit from this program, it's recommended we at least add those 2 slots. So you see that cost. This next one we finally landed on, we believe. You recall that last year, I stood before you with a very nebulous item agenda that's with a big question mark as far as cost. It just said social emotional support at the elementary levels. We've had many conversations on this and what this looks like. The current rendition calls for 2 FTEs at new positions, additional social emotional support at our elementary schools. That being specifically in our 4 pre-K through 4 buildings. This is to do additional, what we did was an exercise of what is needed. So it was, what are we looking for? What are the additional needs that we have? How does it look different? And creating the needs list, and then putting it next side by some job descriptions, said, okay, it's not this, it's landing in this area right now, which is in social workers, which is a new position you do not currently have in the district. The elementary SRO is in partnership with the village. This one was discussed extensively. As an admin council, as a group, I'll be very frank and honest with you. Often it was looked to social emotional support first and foremost as a proactive step into deal with situations. Perhaps the SRO was not the place that we were going to be going, but it is an opportunity we did discuss in admin council and we should do that. And last on the list, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask for additional coaching needs in our instruction. We are currently undergoing ELA second year phase-in, going live next year. We have math, K-12 in the hopper, working hard. We get a soft rollout next year, and moving towards full rollout. We're going to have to talk about technical science and social studies very soon. We need people to do that work. There's resource need and allocation. We will make do, we will figure it out. We always do. But this is not something that just came from me. This was on a list and hit about dead center on the admin council list as far as a need. Just to continue to facilitate the vast curriculum work we're doing in the district. Of course, I come up with the next round number of 400,000. Yes.
The instructional coach line item, is that a third party that we would hire to do that, or is that a service through BOCES?
Thank you. I forgot to mention that. Apologies. Point 8 does represent that cost as a BOCES FTE. If it was brought internal, that price would be different. But currently, we already do 0.8 through BOCES for our two instructional coaches. They're phenomenal, but I'd love to have as our own, but they are at least assigned to us. Katrina and Tiffany Mesterberry, but that represents the BOCES coach.
So that would be essentially doubling what we currently have? You just said we currently have 0.8.
We currently have 2.8s.
We have 2.8 now.
And we have a
third.
Yes, correct. And we do have a 0.4 in Cheryl Tice. Phenomenal work for the work. She is the one I referenced earlier, 0.4 instructional coach. Second. Yes. So currently we have 1.6 and 2.0.
The alternative education slot, is that the STEM Academy slot or is it different?
No, it's not. We've already built in 2 additional slots for the STEM Academy.
That's already built in.
We've already built it in. We're going to bring it forward, but now that you mentioned, yes.
Okay.
We will be adding 2 slots to P Tech.
This is different. This
Correct.
Is Thank you.
And we, along those lines, have worked on our assessment of candidate process and
Yes.
acceptance.
Yes. You'll recall that there was some difficulty in choosing candidates that and accessibility to certain candidates. P-Tech program was built out of a at-risk grant. So what we did this year with the help of Ron Holloway is we pre-screened, and Marty and Steve, is we pre-screened our students to determine, and we had teachers and their teams go through lists of students and determine who met the mark of what the STEM Academy look fors were. And from that list, we made recommendations. I believe in the end it was about 5 students. Could have been 6, but I think 2 removed themselves from the list or something to that effect. So we sent forth, say, choose 2 from this pool that we pre-approved. That way, getting rid of the understanding of, oh, my kid's going there next year, which we dealt with last year. Some assumptions by parents. Because poor communication, new program, had to work out the kinks. And I think we've been in a good spot in the end this year.
The good part about that in this year's budget is we just opted to put it in at this point because it's been ongoing. But of our 5 students, we have to remember BOCES STEM program has final selection. So if they selected 2, we're going to put those 2 in. If they only select 1, we would only put 1 in. If they say nobody meets their entry criteria, then we would not, and then we'd reallocate that funds for that.
Thank you.
Just to update this slide with the considerations you heard from Tony, as well as the 2 items I mentioned related to the tax cut calculation, the additional state aid, and the increase to our interest expense. The gap moves up to 6.4. So again, without any of these tools, one note on the state aid piece, current word on the street is we may not have that on-time budget. We're hearing he wants to do it right versus on time, whatever the right means. So one thing we may want to consider as we're building this budget is to build the budget based on the state aid as we know it today, based on the latest proposal, and then the state aid that we get if and when the budget settles, we could use that as a straight allocation to our health claims. So make a plan for it now and then use that as additional if we need to as well. So this is the all-inclusive list of the budget considerations presented to date. As we did last year, the administrative council got together, had a very good open conversation about the needs of each one, and this is how the group came together to prioritize the items you've seen so far.
Sure.
Okay, so with that, sorry.
So basically what Katie presented to you is sort of the administrative council as well as the district administration looking through and trying to at least work with, understand each other's needs, each other's wants, and put it in sort of categorical order from top to bottom. We know we can't add all of this. We know that if we only had 150,000, you're up at the top one, if that was the case. We don't know where the right spot is for the monetary. We're looking at about $300,000 is what we think we might be able to do depending on our tax levy final solution. But as you look down, once we know those figures, we can go down and assess. But we also may look at it, how do we do a little bit more, such as when you look at the repeater system, say we got down there, and we were either a little bit over or a little bit under. We could look at trimming some of that back and doing it over a 2-year. No different than the calculator over a 1, 2, or 3-year period. So we have some tools built in. Right now, that 300 mark puts you right around the calculator, the repeater system in there. And obviously, we would have to do something to get within that amount just because the repeater systems and social workers are almost 300 on its own. So we would ask you to look at it when you see 504 plan district support. That's something internal we're going to have to work out no matter what. So we're probably going to take that off and we will address that as we go forward because we could potentially have a retirement, we could potentially have some moves. So let's not make it part of the budget, but we'd be wrong if we didn't show it because we've already mentioned it. As you get farther down, obviously all of those things are important to us. We just may have to go to another day, another year, another budget cycle. So as you look through, do you have any questions, any thoughts, or anything that you're absolutely, hey, we really need this, because that helps us first and foremost, just because of the fact, at least we're all trying to make sure, we've already talked about it as administrative, also need to talk about it as a board, on setting some of our discussions for April 4th.
The JV lacrosse coaches are currently volunteer?
Right.
Yes. They would be the only JV program to have assistance, correct, if that was approved, which that could be potentially problematic because I believe everybody else would be coming and having a justification for it. I think as Mr. Conklin sort of indicated through some of our discussions that potentially reflective of why it is where it is on the priority list.
Let me just ask one follow-up question though. Is there some specific need we're trying to address by even putting it forth to begin with? If it's the only program to have assistance at that level?
It was because of the nature of the game. One was that assistant would be needed to help coordinate our student athletes in skills and drills, and also the fact that there's also a contact sport. And having a second assistant also helps with safety procedures.
see Mike, that Mike Coughlin did pretty well, it looks like, in the prioritization exercise. So I'm just curious why cleaner and building maintenance are categorized so highly.
We had, first of all, they took the severe brunt of the reductions back in 2009, where they were cut almost 50%, I think it was, as he was saying. But they were very deep. So we're trying to rebuild, obviously, with the construction that's going on, we're going to have to rebuild so that. Mike sort of brought cleaner and building maintenance. He had to have a discussion, which one's more important for him at this current time. That's why the rankings are where they are. But I think the administrative team also recognized that maintenance mechanic is also a need, but it's been moved up a little. But right now, it's right in that gray area, whether or not we can afford it. But as you're seeing, things that you see one year are tending to come back. When I first came, this list was like $3.2 million. This year it's 900,000, but we've been addressing things and then bringing others back. So I think that's a product of all our work over the past several years to really start trying to look at what is the most important need that we need at the current time. So hopefully that helps.
I'd like to see the elementary SRO make the cut. I just think in today's environment, you have to have it. I don't see any way around it. If it's up there, then I think we should afford it.
That was a difficult one, I will tell you, for the conversation. And I think we had, and my administrative team can jump in, I think we had that discussion. The question was more so, the elementaries currently get serviced by both of our SROs currently at the high school and the middle school, which also addresses the intermediate school. There's been relatively few and far between, but there have been times where they've called in those officers have assisted. And perfectly well and good, and I think everybody's been happy with that. The issue, however, for administration is that they've had much more needs where the SRO cannot become involved in the social emotional realms within the school, because unfortunately they have their rules that they have to be hands-on. And I believe the SRO could help parents more so in some of these issues, how to address it. But the greater need right now, and that's why, I think that's how it's transitioned, was at the social worker, social emotional support. However, that's why it's up there, is because in this day and age, it's just whether or not we do it this year, next year, could we go another year? But I see your point. I mean, it only takes one thing to happen. Anybody else? Tony?
And everyone else up there to say that was our conversation, the proactive, rather than waiting for an incident to occur and having some address it. We seem to have that with our municipalities and people and departments coming to assist when needed. Better to put those monies towards the elementary social workers.
One of our uniquenesses is that we have 2 state trooper barracks very close to our far edges of our district, Big Flats and Ridge Road, that they've also provided support. So I think that's where it's entered in. Any administrator want? Or did I cover it okay? Fairly.
Pretty well. And then when I needed SRO support, I needed the SROs to come over yesterday to look at the deal with me. They were over there in 5 minutes. We had the conversation we need to have, and then we were good, and they wrote up their report, and we were good. So they've always been very responsive. If there's one SRO to share between the 4 buildings, I mean, they'd be there 25% of the time. I'm not sure how I would use an SRO at least once a week, if not twice a week.
I think that's what they were struggling with, is because like one of our initial plans is we'd have like the social emotional support combined with the SRO, and they do a half a day at each building and switch the 2 buildings. But that didn't necessarily meet some of the needs and discussions that we're having. So ultimately we settled upon this, but that's how it might out. So hopefully that's getting more information. But appreciate the points and we'll consider it.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Just is there any sense that the current SRO coverage we have at the high school, for example? We have one, right? Is that adequate? Is there ever been discussion of the need for additional? And I'm thinking maybe you could have someone doing partial high school and then maybe visiting elementaries, or is there any sense of that coverage being?
I don't know if that's an easier one to answer. Mike, what are your thoughts? You live it every day.
An additional one, and then have a, I mean, I would say at this point, our current SRO will carve out time to go to elementaries to visit. The uniqueness for us is that if he's not in the building, we just call 911 and the road guys are there instantaneously.
Yeah.
So it's,
we're very lucky.
you know, our coverage is very good, whether they're there or not there. It's great having them in the building. I just don't know, Dan, to be honest with you, and again, that's something I haven't really thought about either, is the visiting. But Howard and I know, and Dan West do that now. They'll go out to elementaries and visit now.
From what, and thank you, it sounds like there's not a sense that what we have today at the high school is inadequate. That we're,
yeah, the good part is it's a great relationship with the village. If we need any help, I mean, the high school or I or Tony or anybody can just call Tom Stickler and so we'll have somebody here immediately.
Kind of going through the list, and if 300,000 is a number you're looking at, you know, I would certainly like to include some of the calculators, and I think if we could buy some of the repeater system, I think we heard, you know, a couple weeks ago that there are some pockets of horse heads that are pretty remote, and there's, you know, there's a safety concern there, so I'd like to allocate some money towards that to get started at least. Regarding the tax cap, I don't know if you want to input on that. You know.
We'll get to that.
Okay. I have input on that too.
Yeah. Because that can, once we have that can, once we go back and play with the number and the budget,
well, you need
we can use the flush.
Right.
I think, and if I make a comment on the repeater system, we know to handle the buses first and foremost.
Okay.
It's probably $60,000 to $75,000 somewhere in there. We could get zero or more on a number between now and the 4th. I think we looked at maybe a 1 to 3 year rotational cycle on the calculators, which if you just did the third, that makes a significant savings so that you can reach some of the others.
Is there an opportunity for the social workers? Could you do one this year and one next year, or would it have to be?
They'd like 4. I've got them at least to 2 right now, but you know, if here's the thing, we sometimes have uniquenesses in our budget too. That if all of a sudden we could expand that, we would look at that because it will build a better elementary educational experience for all schools. So we would start with 2 and probably come back the next year with 2. But if we could, if we could all of a sudden find a way to capture a 3rd person, we'd have to figure out how to do it because we have 4 buildings. How do we address the need? And we'd have to have our discussions there. So we thought this is the good starting point, and then if we can do more, we'll try to do more. But right now, we know that that's a high priority. Did I cover that okay? Making sure I don't turn to that. Sarah, yes.
I just want to make another comment about the elementary SRO. I know you're talking about, you know, if there's emergencies, they would call somebody and so forth and so on. But I think there's another aspect to it too, and that's just having that person in the building that it says to the children, this person is here and I am safe. It says to the community, we have someone in there keeping our children safe. Not just to,
even if it's rotational, there's a way to,
you know, somebody is there. I think it's important.
So if I can sort of survey the board, if we were able to do something, move that elementary SRO, is that where the board would like to see?
I'd like to see it moved up.
yeah, I share Brian's view around the calculators. I think maybe you can't do them all, but it's important for, and that goes right to the instructional program. It's important that our students have current, you know, tools. I think the bus monitor is important, and we heard from Pete about that, but I could see us addressing the elementary SRO need, for example, flipping and putting the bus monitor out to, you know, I think I would prioritize the SRO over that. In other words,
if it moves up into that.
yeah, it's a way to move it up, is what I'm saying.
I would ask you, let us work on that, but understanding the concept is really what we need to bring you something more for the board. And then try to narrow in and finalize our budget at this point. Because really, you've seen almost the full budget at this point. The only thing is now we have to balance it. But knowing some of these key issues and core concepts, that's where we'll try to settle and make the most reasonable decisions to bring something back to the board. So, but if I can just survey the board, is everybody sort of coalescing around try to get the SRO?
Comment. So, I don't know if Patrick's sentiment about the SRO is shared by other principals, but, you know, I want this person to be engaged and have, you know, things to do and, you know, not just be a presence. So I guess that's my only, that's a concern.
I don't, this is like a lawyer, never ask a question you don't know. Seeing how, wait a second, seeing how Patrick's name was mentioned, I'll start with that.
So I just wanted to clarify my comment too. I think all the topics on there, we do want all of those to be clarified. So it's not that we don't want the elementary SRO. We would love to have the elementary SRO. Exactly for what were pointed out was the presence in the community and all of that. I guess when we're sitting and talking about prioritization and what is the need, it would be nice to have the SRO. There's a lot of positive aspects to that. So it's just priority where we put them. So we like all of those things. We want all those things. It's the conversation of what can we get.
It's like trying to find the balance between everybody.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the top part, we tried to hit, and I commend the administration, they tried to hit almost everybody in the upper half. Some people, and I will tell you, Mike will say, somebody else has to get something before I get both my cleaner and my maintenance person. I think that they've done this in a very selfish, non-biased way to just what they need. And that's what I think has been the power behind the prioritization. Like I said, we love all of this, but we can't go out of that tax levy. So we have to find the rational ability, and we have to try to address our use of reserves and what we know we're going to get from the state, because we have to make this renewable every single year going forward. Now, we haven't hit all of our tools at bringing it into line, and if we can hit some of those tools, we find out we have a little bit more. We may use a little bit more reserve for the 1 year, as long as we're reproducing it, to get that advantage. So I think that's really, our work happens really now from here until the 4th, to try to bring you the best options that you sort of help us glean are sort of your priorities as well.
Liz and Anne Marie, did you have something else you want to add?
I was just going to add, for Big Flats, obviously we're a little unique because we're out in Big Flats and we don't have the Horseheads Village Police, but I really feel our building is very well supported by Chemung County Sheriff as well as the state police. We're very fortunate, obviously, at Big Flats to have a lot of parents who are state troopers, but even though we don't necessarily have Chemung County Sheriffs, I know some of you who live in Big Flats, you've got to see those sheriff cars sitting in my parking lot very frequently, and they will truly just come in, they walk the building, they give the kids high fives, they have that wonderful relationship. I believe, Mary Ann, that the kids do feel very safe in our school. Going back to that prioritization, it goes back to what do we need the most? We need the additional hourly, daily support to support our kids that are in crisis. And unfortunately, I don't feel as though in prioritizing that SRO can provide that to a student because they're not trained to do that. So right, they have to kind of be hands-off because they're small, where a social worker is going to actually be able to not only support a student in crisis, but also potentially, our goal is to obviously be very proactive and to start teaching the students right in the classroom daily skills to be supportive, so they don't have kind of that anxiety that kind of sometimes puts them into that crisis mode.
I don't know if I was misunderstood. I didn't mean that the SRO would replace the social worker.
Oh.
I see the social workers as definite priorities. They should be at the top.
Thank you.
But I think the SRO should be up a little bit higher.
Understand.
And just a thought, and I don't know if this is the purchase of the calculators, could that be approached through grant writing?
Unfortunately, when you do grant writing, you have to meet the eligibility for most grants, which is a higher free and reduced than we have. That's one of the disadvantages for being in a very affluent district. We have to be plus 40 to 45% free and reduced, and the district does not propose that.
Anne Marie, did you have anything else?
They both said it very well, but just adding in that we really have an influx of younger children coming that are being raised by grandparents or being raised by foster parents, but they are babies and young children that were born to drug addicted and alcohol addicted parents. So we are seeing children in crises on a daily basis, and it's not one or two children. So that, I think, again, going back to that priority, absolutely would love an elementary SRO. But we were actually begging for 4 social workers because a child doesn't go into crises at 1 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon when the social worker's in your building. And, so we were looking in trying to prioritize to get more of that intense help immediately in that. So we were looking at that and looking at the bus monitor. But we do support the SROs. They're wonderful. It's just for what we're looking for now is helping our children in crises, and there's so many more at the elementary than we've ever had in the past, and they really need that help. They need that intervention while they're young, so it doesn't carry on for their whole life.
It's like if you do the IDEO program, and I know we talked about it, we can't afford it right now, it would be 1 additional social worker, social emotional support, and 1 additional SRO per building. A lot of schools are going that way. We can't.
That'd be a dream team.
Yeah, I mean, one is the SRO, I mean, when you're looking at that team like Liz was saying, is that the child can be in crisis, but remember, the parents a lot of times are in crisis too. And the person that, we can't really help the parents as much, although we do, but sometimes they come in and we're at odds. And that's where the SRO can help mitigate that too. But it takes a specially trained person. We know that we have 1 SRO that will be coming and capable within the village, but if we had to have more, they do not have the manpower as well. So we have to look at building it. It's sort of like, I know, and I'm not saying this for point, if I were to do that SRO and not do the SRO, but use the funds to try to get a 3rd social emotional, yeah, they're going to love me, but then they're going to hate me because they got to fight out of who's going to be half-time in one building or another. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it's sort of like you need 2. But anything will be better at this point than what we have.
I guess this is going to show my ignorance. So currently, we do not have a social worker in every elementary building.
We do. They're overtasked.
We have social work assistants.
More.
To be clear, we have social work assistants, a civil service class. The social workers is a new position. It allows qualifications for it, require deeper, in the job description would require much more contact in the classroom. We realized that at the front of this that there's going to be a lot of time spent with children in crisis, but the long goal for sustainability in these positions is working with teachers and whole classes on proactive natures of behavior, which is more a social worker title than a social work assistant. So that's how we landed as far as a job classification on the social worker. We do have supports. There's wonderful school psychologists, we have SD consultants, we have our social principals, social assistants, and numerous teachers that will pitch in and assist. But this is a specialized area that we can really use.
Okay. So I just want to go back to the elementary SRO for a second. I understand everything you're saying, and I'm not advocating to take the social workers out of slot number one, all right? But I do remember, I was still working, but I went to the board meeting out there, and when all of the spaghetti hit the wall, and we were gonna make all the cuts, and one of the cuts they were gonna make is the SRO. And the first two speakers from the public out of the box were adamant that SRO should not be cut. It was a safety issue. And they basically said, we don't care what you do with the rest of your budget, you'll figure that out, but you darn well better have the SRO there. And I think if we put it on the chart, then it shows we're thinking about it, and then I'm going to quote those folks, you darn well better have the safety of the community in your thoughts. And they'll support us on so many things, but if they don't think the safety of their children is number one, then I don't think they do. So,
No, that's a great comment.
So I know I haven't been exposed to all of your discussions, but I mean, the more I'm hearing about this, I'd kind of like to see us try to get more social workers. If we're having that much issues in our buildings, and how are we going to divide them up? And working for BOCES, I know you can't plan.
Can you get any closer?
I can't get into that, but I know just being down the hallway from programs that can't plan their crises, they have a lot of support and it's needed. And we've had this emphasis on mental health and wellness all year, and I think this would be a good way to follow through on that.
Okay.
I understand completely the problems and issues with trying to schedule one person, 4 places. I did that for years. I also understand that SROs are not social workers. But I think if we could turn back the hands of time, the school board at Sandy Hook Elementary would gladly spend $35,000 for an SRO.
Give me and my team a little bit of time, we'll try to work here. I don't know as much as 4, but I'll try to do our best, that's for sure. Any other questions about the budget before we sort of wrap up? This is one of our big things, because the next wrap up, I can do so much, but I can't tax the community debt. And we have. I mean, when we look at it, our tax levy rate is lower now than when I even started at 1831. We'll have that for the next budget so that you understand where we think the estimate would be for whatever levy we talk about tonight. But that's really going to be our deciding point in the tax budget. 8.62, we go out with that. Even with an SRO, it's going to get voted down. So the question is where do we feel we could? Last year, I think we went at 3.59, and we had almost an 83% approval rate. We communicated, thanks to all the hard work of everybody, as well as the support from our faculty, our seniors, and our community. So it's trying to find where we set that, because once that sets that, it tells us all those other tools. Do you have that next slide by any chance? Well, no, that was the right one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
See, what happens is, we know we can make reductions out of the 6.4. So, but this is our starting point. If we only did 300, we're going to be at 5.8 because we aren't doing another 600,000 in ads. But we can play with that.
But all these pieces here are going to be set once we really know these two things. If we have to go by the governor, we have to assume that's zero. Anything extra will help our budget, or we can do the reserves or lower fund balance or apply it to the health insurance. This is the biggest one, and that's why it's here. It starts the process for us to finish by April 23rd, I think it is. But we'll be pretty close come April 4th. If we have a budget, then what happens is if we know this and this, it starts to set some of this. If we have some surplus, now we can look at those priorities and say maybe we could do a little bit more. Or we could say maybe we could lower the levy a little. Remember, 1/100% is about $3,700. 0.1% is about $37,000. So if we were at 4%, we would be making about $1.2, $1.3 million into that potential tax levy discussion. In other words, that comes off the 6.4. So think about that. We were looking at somewhere around the 3.97. We don't want to insult the community at 3.99. Why don't you go out at 4? But we also know we need somewhere around that to try to make some of this happen. But we wanted to open that up to you because even if you took the 8.6 and cut it in half, or 4.3%, I know we could probably pass it. It would take a lot of work, but I have to think about all those other things that we're going to have to do on behalf of the board in the next couple of years too. So I think it's always been the position of superintendents that you're between 3 and 4 every year, you'll really survive. If they would have done it for the past 20 years, you wouldn't have seen much fluctuation. But we know that as we were running some of our numbers, 3.95, 3.97 is really more of a sweet spot, we think, for us. But we wanted to open up for you guys to have your discussion.
I just have a comment. I mean, I haven't been on the board this long, or that long, but I do appreciate, and I do remember times where the list has been absolutely huge. So I just want to commend you and the entire administrative team for, coming to us with that prioritized list. I mean, obviously, you're the ones that are in this day in and day out and are seeing the needs firsthand. So, I really appreciate that list and that prioritization. And I mean, obviously, you have that more direct experience on where the funding needs to go. So thank you for that.
What were we at last year?
3.58, 3.59, I think we were.
I think the 3.95 sounds reasonable. I think we need to show the public that we're going to add. We're going to add important things. We're going to do still the important work of the district, but we're definitely not going to come out at some crazy percentage that would jeopardize the support.
I'd be good with that number too. Certainly the history, and you'll show us in the charts in the next couple of weeks, that 3.9% usually is 1 to 2%, and as you said, we're still below 2 or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, and if you compare us to other districts that are $23, $24 per thousand, we're in the 18 and change range.
I believe, because I was doing the rough numbers, at 1831 or something, where we came in. I just remember that number from the merger discussion. That's where it was at that time. I think, potentially, depending on what the rate, we'd be right around that. And after 5 years, virtually, the levy would have been flat over those 5 years. Because people, we do have to remind them, for a couple of years, we gave negative reductions back. So it's always keeping that in mind, and you're right. We will put up where Elmira is, where Elmira Heights and Corning are, because those are the districts we compare.
And I think the other thing that would work nicely too, if we were able to keep it at 10%, saying we could have gone up to 8.6, and we're also adding some things into, and I think that's important to tell the community that we're trying to improve the district, not only from a building standpoint, but from the things inside the building too. I think that's pretty impactful.
I have absolute trust in the wonderful lady right sitting there that the sooner she can work on it, the more detailed it gets, right? We're working that 3.9 to 4% on being under there, and then try to get a developed package of what we can and try to take it minimally invasive out of the reduction. So after that, I think we've got that discussion we did. We've got we definitely will be meeting on the 4th. We will have an executive session on that as well for our personnel item. And then we will have the 24th, which is the night that we must vote on, I believe, the administrative budget for BOCES, as well as finalize our budget so that we can put it on our school report card the next day. And then we will go out on our communication tour. We're hitting each of the town halls as well. We have Board of Education candidate forum night if we need one, public hearing, which is set for May 9th, and then obviously the annual election on May 21st. The one thing you should realize is tonight in your board agenda packet are the 4 propositions that will be going up. So that once those are up, we will start our notice and publication, and that will be all included in that presentation. So for the most part, thank you for your patience as we've got it built, now we've got to try to find